Chapter 2. New chapter, new way. The day I moved to Nyborg, my father didn't get up. He couldn't say goodbye to me. He couldn't comprehend that I wanted to move, and he knew I would probably never come back again. It was a strange experience, but I knew the man and the way he couldn't handle emotions, so on with me to Nyborg. I think that at the time, my parents were already working totally overtime with themselves in the wild culture shift they had made. An identity crisis at the age of almost 50, in a foreign country without family and friends, and with 2 teenagers. It was all spiced up with the integration of a child with multiple diagnoses and greater life challenges, not me, but my brother. I think, unconsciously, I ran away just before I turned 18, when they were already at that time unrecognizable to me. 2 years of separation between us and the family while we waited to come to Denmark, and the chaos it brought with it before we got here had not exactly helped in the process either. I didn't talk to my mother for those 2 years, and my father wasn't there. So I had enjoyed myself and being a teenager in my little bubble, who was met with the wild integration by moving to Denmark. There, everything changed, also in our family dynamics and inside me. Today, I'm very grateful that they gave me the opportunity of a respectful detachment and all the possibilities that have led me here and to the person I am today. While I was unpacking at the boarding school, all of a sudden, there was a man standing behind me in my room. Of course, it was my father. He still couldn't stand the thought of not setting me free with love and respect. He had driven all the way from Copenhagen to Nyborg to give me a goodbye hug and a few wise words that I do not remember now. I cannot remember what he had brought me, but he did have something. And that visit became one of the greatest moments for me in my consciousness development and understanding ability. Imagine, he could step in and overcome his pride, overcome what he believed to be the truth, and give me what I see today as the love of blessing. The divorce of my parents and chaos. My double cultural integration, which was successful without a single case or experience of rejection, unfortunately did not become my family's experience. Quite the opposite. They had their world, their understanding ability, and their way of dealing with life. They divorced shortly after my moving out. What I do know about the divorce is that it was not one of the nice ones, and probably was a state of shock they got into at that time and never got out of again. They still talk about their divorce and those days, and the way they talk about each other has not changed for 30 years. Here, I learned one of the greatest lessons of my life. To forgive is not to give. To forgive oneself is to give oneself freedom from the history of the past, which is an obstacle to balance in our emotional and logical thinking behavior. Forgiving is to set oneself free from a bad experience in the past, which is not appropriate or useful anymore in the present tense. This does not mean that the other person gets the right or privilege to the action that has a negative effect on us. But the lesson here is to forgive the other for the experience, so that it doesn't get stuck in our consciousness and thus torments us as a memory that controls our emotions and thus our behavior. Forgive, give back, is to re-own ourselves with the learning we have now gained from the other party's inappropriate behavior, to let go of the bond they create with us through the memory, experience, and consequence of their action, so that they no longer own us and our experience, and thus our understanding ability and comprehension ability. If we do not find the ability to forgive, then we will be stuck in the ownership they have of us through their action, which for us has created a bad experience as an effect, managing and controlling us. When we face other similar situations, we can relive the experience again and again and get stuck in a negative spiral which hurts us and others around us. Please do remember here that our reaction, which becomes the next cause, has an effect for us and others around us, and thereby a consequence for all of us. This spiral can drag us into, for example, a guilty conscience, self-blame caused by low self-esteem, and thus a sense of justice, all caused by a struggle between the negative ego and the need for recognition of others in the form of the admission that they have made mistakes, or the recognition by others that they are victims of their action. Here, we must remember that we have a responsibility to ourselves, not to see ourselves as victims, and not to fight for justice, but to fight for a conciliation or compromise. That is, if we do not have an opportunity to forgive and withdraw completely from the circumstance that the person is creating, or the person themselves. If we interact with people who judge us or others to be right or wrong, instead of judging what is good for them or their needs, we shall accept being judged ourselves when things do not suit them in our relationship with them. We can thus get into situations or circumstances with inappropriate circumstances that we must say no to, or end up in a fight for being right or giving right. So if we are not right, we end up struggling with our sense of justice, and ultimately a forgiveness is necessary if we feel offended or unfairly treated. Just because we forgive, we do not necessarily concede or give the other party that their action was right or wrong. But we own the situation and turn it to our advantage to create a positive cause for our next effect. Forgiveness gives us freedom from the opinions and attitudes of other people and the way they handle things, freeing us from them and their effects, and giving us the possibility to be the owner of ourselves. Then, again, to forgive is not to concede or to give, to acknowledge the inappropriate behavior of others, but it is to free ourselves from the ownership they take over us and our thought patterns, with the following blocking of our abilities, and all of us to develop and be us. We'll be stuck in hatred, anger, bitterness, if we do not forgive others for what they are trying to impose on us, their convictions of right or not right, right or wrong. We always have the possibility to choose off and walk away. When we forgive others for their actions and what they have hurt us with, we forgive them their behavior and its consequence back to themselves. We no longer think about what they have done and why, or make a calculation of what this has cost us. This is what makes us jointly responsible for something that we can easily let go of by forgiving them. Free ourselves from the bond they are trying to trap us in, so that we can interact with them and energize them on something that is solely their need. When we forgive others, we do not concede or give them our good energy and our resources. We bring ourselves home to ourselves and are thus the owner and the one responsible for us and not what has happened to or for us. Aarhus is my city. Shortly after I moved to Aarhus from the boarding school with my boyfriend, my parents ended up in utter chaos, and they exposed themselves to the wildest divorce where they could no longer be in the same room. Neither of them ever again became the ones I knew and who raised me. Integration is one of the most difficult processes in a change process. The wound and the too big change process in the basis of their identity killed them completely inside, and they didn't find a way out of the survival mode, which they got into several times. Perhaps the fact that I was not there anymore was the biggest cause why everything went wrong. I don't think so, but they thought so at the time. I am and have always been the lifeline and energizer to both myself and others. It has been the biggest challenge of my life, a learning that I still live with. But I made the choice to stay on my track, and they had to come and go in their processes, as I had managed on a completely different level. I couldn't help them without falling down and hitting myself hard, just like them. Combined intelligence, combined consciousness. I was and am the pattern breaker. I follow my intuition and instincts without putting a question mark to either of them, unconsciously. I follow what my strategic sense and my intuition in the form of my emotional sense say. What is so difficult about the comprehension abilities, understanding abilities, and the intellect of the emotions, being developed together with the operational intellect, is that their combination creates a separation in the social behavior and in what love is. How many forms of love are there? And how do we each define love according to the level of development we are at? There's a huge difference between true love, unconditional love, love of infatuation, friendly love, social love, familial love, ego-marked love, addiction love, and self-love, independence love. I had enough in navigating around as an 18-year-old. My parents had taught me to be independent, and they gave me the freedom to be who I was. I have to admit that, despite everything they were going through. That is true love. Dear Mother and Father, thank you for everything. Thank you for giving me the possibility and the torch for completing the big change process you two started together, by breaking the old thought forms being present in both of your family and social cultures. You chose each other and thereby the love, and showed me the way. You gave me the love I needed, but also your bad sides and experiences have helped me become the one I am today, where I define and feel myself as the epitome of happiness and success. This book is also dedicated to you. Without you, there would not be this book of life with philosophizing, which is hopefully going to help and inspire many people. Maybe even other frontrunners in their life processes and development, regardless of whether they are integrations, change processes, consciousness journeys, or equality. Life away from my old family. Since I didn't know what to do, study, or who I was after I moved to Aarhus, I had to make a familiar and unconscious decision to study the same profession as my parents. Not because it interested me. I would so much rather have studied psychology or design back then. My father was a dentist and my mother was a dental assistant, so I chose to apply to the Aarhus University as a dental hygienist. Basically, I knew that this was not what I was supposed to do, but I didn't doubt for a second that this was the way I should go. The day I received the letter from Aarhus University about my admission was the day I took the first step towards what I do today. It wasn't that I became a full-time worker in the world of teeth in the coming years, but the knowledge I gained from the psychological, pedagogical, pedantic, and anatomical subjects was a step further on the research topics I came up with after my divorce. Topics such as quality of life, health of human and system abilities, competences, passion, transformation, and consciousness. Without this education, I would not have been able to join the other educations later in life. So it's not always what we choose in the present tense makes sense, but later on, it will prove why that step was necessary for the way forward. My first proposal. In my life so far, I have experienced many forms of love and have been proposed to 4 times. My first boyfriend proposed to me one day right in the middle of the Bank Nordea on Stortå in Aarhus, on the back of a cash receipt. I don't remember how old I was then, but we were engaged for a time before everything started to go a little awry, or rather, our ways parted. I think I was about 21 years old, and he must have been about 30. I had only just begun to live life and get to know myself, and the idea of marriage and a life of this kind of stability was far away from me. I tried to get out of the relationship without success. Well, it was entirely my own responsibility. He was one of the sweetest men I have ever known. Saying no by setting boundaries was not something I had learned or knew how to balance with emotionally. This meant that here I spotted out in an area that needed further development. My behavior pattern with old thought forms, or lack of new thought forms, spotted out where I was weak and vulnerable and didn't have the clout to make an impact. This would prove to be an inappropriate pattern that appeared again in my divorce many years later. My parents may have given me a lot of new thought forms and freedom as tools, but what I didn't see was the profound influence and impact the socio-cultural part had also affected them or me. The beliefs we learn through our schooling or collective consciousness are definitely one of the dominant factors in our thought forms and the behavior patterns that are unconscious in us. Not being able to speak up clearly was definitely a challenge I had not learned to handle, nor how to actually keep the limit that I spend a lot of effort setting, without having to bend over because others would not accept them. We cannot say no to others without speaking up to something they want or need. This was an exciting journey and the greatest learning about the feminine and masculine forces inside us. The balance between the feminine and masculine intelligent consciousness, female and male management. It's not about being masculine and to act or say no with decisiveness to move on. Then it would not be with both feminine and masculine energies in balance, but just one of them. No, actually, it's about using the feminine abilities and acting to give us self-love, to think about ourselves and what we need to be happy, to take responsibility for what we want, to make use of our positive ego, even though our action rejects or hurts people, and thus results in them reacting with conflict or struggle. We should use both our feminine and masculine inner powers in an interaction together. If we are not happy, we cannot make others happy. Then everything else will not be okay. Not speaking up will prevent others from moving forward and being happy, because we are afraid to make others sad, because we want to take care of them or spare them, because we try to avoid a confrontation. Care and self-love for us has an effect called care and love for others. Self-love is only possible if we use both of our inside opposite poles, being the feminine and masculine sides, in an interaction. It's time for us to learn from each other, teach each other, and help each other move forward with gender diversity, from the divergent understanding ability to universality. Men are women's teachers in self-love and femininity. That is exactly what many men are incredibly good at. They use their feminine side or power for self-love and make decisions based on what is good for them and thus their family. They set a target based on what they want and what makes them happy, and run straight for it. Please be aware here that we're not talking about the negative ego. We are not talking about being egoistic and using others for personal gain, but about being present and empathetic to ourselves, being playful and daring to dream and realize what creates happiness for ourselves. Today, put us in a position with self-love, as then we ourselves can be the source of love for us and thus others. Then we know how much our freedom to realize ourselves as human beings means to us. And with this form of self-love, we are able to interact with each other, where space expands and everybody can develop without limitations. That is true love. My old mentor always said, in a true love relationship, space expands. It doesn't constrict. But if we are not able to give ourselves the freedom to be and do what we need, we cannot give others that kind of love either. Women are men's teachers in power of action and masculinity. We women are very good at acting and handling difficult situations. Administration and management are an innate gift of the ancient thought forms through the ages until now. Creating a home, raising children, providing harmony, all activities and well-being. In fact, we manage to create and bear children and thus be physically responsible for moving our race forward. Not a small thing. Women's detailed characteristics and the ability to remember everyone in the action process with empathy and communication is a force for action with impact, which gives a very special power with an enormously great sound. So, the old thought form that women have no power of action is not quite updated. Men could be as detailedly empowered as women, and women could learn to be more feminine and to cultivate self-love like men. And then we may be getting closer and closer to the answer to why we are created the way we are. How should we use each other? What can we learn from each other? Why are we each other's opposite poles? And the necessity of this difference to achieve balance and equality. That we are actually not that different from each other when it comes to the heart of the matter. We cultivate the opposite poles, and our causes and effects are just supplementary and create balance. We can teach each other very much and learn from each other, instead of expecting that each one of us should live up to an archetype role, which old thought forms have described to us. We are born in the dualities, and everything is always in change and transformation. We were born as men and women because we are dependent on each other, and the opposite pole to each other's balance physically. We all have a feminine and a masculine side inside us. When we violate, control, or overrule our opposite gender, we violate, control, and overrule something of ourselves, as we all have both poles. Without the opposite poles, our survival is out of the question. Men and women cannot have children without each other. We are each carrying a grail within ourselves and have the algorithm of consciousness to the second party for our individual and collective development. We are in the age of diversities, and it's a time of awakening for the development of equality between us on all fronts. Not because we should be able to do the same things, but because we should learn to respect and accept the differences we encounter in the other gender identity and gender diversity, namely without judging, and finding new ways to integrate with each other. Everything in our human world starts with our meeting and integration between two different and divergent genders. Our survival is dependent on this integration and of uniting our differences. This book and the various perspectives, thought forms, and mind games appeal and speak to the female-male intelligent consciousness, where different gender diversities, identities, cultures, nationalities, beliefs, thought forms, and general opposite poles are united, without men having to act like women or women like men. The origin of everything ends somewhere in our physical origin, namely in men and women, in the world of dualities and opposite poles. Combined intelligence creates self-love. Self-love comes from the concrete and logically thinking intelligence form, which balances us in our emotions and helps us navigate combined intelligence combined consciousness. For me, the authoritarian beliefs, perceptions, and the stupid polite cultural DNA followed me for many years. It created me a lot of over-responsibility for other people, with bad behavior patterns that created inappropriate effects and circumstances by me overruling myself and putting others before myself. In doing so, I didn't fulfill my needs to be a happy person where I was. It was very difficult, in particular as I am so different from the norms and was able to do so much at a young age, and furthermore a foreign woman, so deliberately overruling myself to be in the game with the others seemed like the only survival strategy. Too much empathy is just as bad as too much negative ego, or rather, it's because of the thoughts of the negative ego that we become too empathetic. Funnily enough, they are each other's opposite poles too. It created a weakness in me, where I couldn't keep the boundaries I set and had, or rather did not think I had. In other words, the opportunity to walk or act. It wasn't enough to be strong, conscious, and to say no, because I was an intelligent and free power woman. There was something elementary that had to be changed in my unconscious, and which stopped me from breaking through. It's not about my power to act or my masculinity. Instead, it's about my femininity, my ability to prioritize and be present for myself, to be able to fulfill my own needs. When too much empathy creates imbalance with great over-responsibility, that's the enemy of self-love. The fact was that others were not allowed to feel bad, because I had the strength and the love, the ability to complete changes or choose changes, which not many others could do in the same way. My great strength became my weakness and self-defeat, as I gave and gave without getting what I also needed. This made me pause some of myself, so that others could follow along or not feel bad about themselves when they were with me. The challenge came anyway, when I generated solutions that not many people could keep up with, and which were from the whole of me. They were even more overwhelmed by it all when they tried to keep up with something they could not. Or they lost control because they were not the ones who came up with the solution. After all, they had not counted me for anything. I was just a crooked type who was able to do something different from many others. They were good at their things. No one told me that there are more people like me who just don't fit into the boxes everyone else fits into, the normal. On the contrary, everyone tried to tell me that I needed to be changed to fit into their boxes. I just had my own little box, which was mine. I was, am, and will be the divergent type with a curly brain who does not thrive in the boxes that everyone else thinks are cool, cozy, and life-giving. We are each good at our things that interest us. We cannot all fit into the social boxes in which the collective consciousness and the recognized systems find themselves. I always ended up overruling myself so others would not feel bad about themselves, instead of owning who I was and what I could. Well, I was young and I had a life ahead of me to learn, and actually ended up creating a business of my skills and experiences so that I can teach others what I was good at and actually didn't dare to use back then. It's ironic to look back on. But to detach myself from all the different elements I had to take is really an elephant. To set me free is one of the biggest tasks I have had in my life. It wasn't about me being more clever than others, but that I'm simply good at what I'm good at, just like you are good at what you are good at. I simply had a world very different from that of others, no matter what country I was in. I had a great time with myself, and I loved my little bubble. Unfortunately, my survival strategy to join the collective consciousness and social confirmation resulted in me turning down who I was and thus stepping out of my bubble. It was probably necessary for my integration and reset after I came to Denmark, or as a child in relation to my little brother. But I needed an instruction manual to be able to use all of myself. For this, I could not in Persia, nor could I in Denmark. And being alone in one's bubble is probably not natural or part of our nature. We are collective and social organisms. I just didn't know how to deal with people's imbalance once they turned my strength into their weakness, which then became my imbalance. I couldn't handle this imbalance until many years later, but I was also only in my early 20s. Maybe too much to expect to be able to. I don't know. But I was conscious about it, and so I had to find solutions. The challenge was, and is, that we cannot be taught in the world of emotional intelligence, and there are no recognized tools or anything concrete that could help me. The world of emotions and the logically thinking world challenged me. I was a very emotional person, but I was also very logically thinking and concrete. This created an imbalance to me, as I didn't use my whole self in an interaction with others. I had to find a user manual. This maturation process and consciousness journey became the most exciting learning and story of my life. Self-responsibility and over-responsibility. Self-responsibility creates the balance for you and everyone else around you. Over-responsibility is your negative ego. Everything is about our handling and comprehending ourselves and our imbalances, and then we shall learn to own who we are, as well as our wholenesses, our own boundaries, and the ability to set them for ourselves first. In my case, I generated the solutions which others hadn't seen coming. The result of the solution was that I had the success experience and the feeling of happiness in my own wholeness, which others couldn't understand and thus not handle. Here, it was all about how I handled this, and didn't have to take responsibility for other people's reaction patterns. After all, I only generated solutions for what I was good at. If only I knew then that everything was tied to the fact that I didn't use my feminine power in me, the self-love that was supposed to cherish me, my skills and what I contributed, which others could not, and which had to be independent of other people's confirmations or realizations. I just had to use my whole self and not be too empathetic or too concrete, not too much of anything. If only somebody at school had taught me about the opposite poles, their principles and their work, and thus the importance of these. If the thought form that men are good at using their femininity in themselves in the form of self-love holds, think what they can do if they use this ability outwardly in the patterns of their masculinity's power of action. And vice versa, if women used their masculinity to use their femininity patterns of action outwardly when acting. We teach each other and hold the key to each other as male and female. We evolve and develop each other. The abilities we have as strengths are the weaknesses of the other gender. It is only our faiths and beliefs that have destroyed the magical dynamics we were originally born with. The first step to being a happy person, entrepreneur, leader, mother, and father is to go back to our origins and look at which thought forms, such as faith, societal norms, and the development of time, have imagined us to be, and which may not quite fit, are inappropriate, and need to be phased out. It is not that it has been the age of men and now women are going to the dish. For once, let's call it the age of diversity, where we must stand together, strengthen each other's weaknesses, and remember that we are here to be a human being who is happy. It is simple, concrete, and logical, with emotional factors. The emotional, operational consciousness, and forms of intelligence. How were the others supposed to recognize me and my product, which was so different from everything else they knew, when I didn't even know myself and didn't recognize me? Everyone says poor self-esteem and self-confidence. It never felt right to rate it to be any of those things to me. It was about the fact that I needed concrete, provable, and logical explanations, something I could stand up for. For I wasn't only an emotional person, but my logical thinking meant a lot to me and was half of me. It was never about low self-esteem or self-confidence, nor was it about being afraid of success. It was about a maturation process. I had to find the bridge between the different abilities and how we can better feel and think about future solutions, how we can understand emotions in a logical way so that we can balance with them, so that we can better understand each other and the opposite gender. I was curious and had set myself up to do what I do today. I was the theorist who turned over every stone to understand and make it all fit together. I am still the same person who has today invented the algorithm and built the theory with the laws and hypotheses that disprove what they said, or that others said in the form of old thought forms, old norms of society. That it took so many years to get here is another matter entirely. But if I had listened to people's assessment that I was afraid of success, that I had low self-esteem or poor self-confidence and performance anxiety, then I would have lost my curiosity and the passion that was my driving force to find solutions needed in the process. I believed in myself. Just because we need to develop in some areas doesn't mean we lack self-confidence or have low self-esteem or are afraid of something. It's really not okay that we stamp each other out so definitively. So, dear you who judge and believe that you know, your words to others may destroy and damage many things for those you judge if they are not strong in themselves. You may kill their curiosity in their lives. This may stop their flow, particularly if they are not old enough to separate. Words have power and thus an energy. Your words are the cause of everything in your life. They appear from your thought form and your emotions based on your past tense history, if you are not a conscious human being. We all have a responsibility for what we say to others, what we receive, and how much we take other people's words in. It is also our responsibility to believe in ourselves and keep doing so, not to let other people's words knock us down. Our positive ego and self-love, with our inner passion as power of action, must not be influenced by other people's programs and thought forms. How, what, why, who, and when. Then came all the questions to which I had to generate a solution, but this time for myself. How should I couple and balance the intellect of emotions with the operational intellect so that I could better manage my own inner forces and thus cherish and price myself with great gratitude and self-love? After all, I wasn't afraid of success, as I have always felt successful, even when I've made mistakes. I believed in myself, what I saw and felt, so I had a positive ego, self-confidence, and worth. I was just a playful child in the course of life, and played with life instead of letting life play with me. The most important thing was that I didn't believe what others claimed. Whether it was right or not, it doesn't matter. It's about the fact that I was happy. and didn't believe in them and still do not. I believe that we are in a process of maturation and development throughout our lives, and then we phase out like everything else. It's not predetermined by the opinions and words of others, just like no one can tell when you are going to die. I am here to be a happy person, to contribute what I am happy about, and to do what creates balance, and then I shall die. If I am a happy and cheerful person, I can be a good leader, an awesome and passionate entrepreneur, a magical mother, and a fantastic girlfriend, friend, or colleague. There was a question coming with my personality and my world, and it was a very concrete, operational intellect, but also contained extremely much not concrete emotional intellect. How could I couple those two worlds concretely? How could I balance in them and be myself outwardly in an interaction with others, like I was in my own little bubble, but more developed and with higher consciousness? Like that time as a child, where I was whole. Before my move and integration, I had to change a big part of me and put something to sleep and pause in order to be a teenager in a new culture with a totally new identity. As written before, one identity at a time. With the passage of time, and with all the experiences, periods of research, and all that life offered me, I found the answers and the way to cultivate the dynamic intuition and organic instincts in a more quality-based way. With more balance, I found peace and a self-awareness that is still inexplicable today and hopefully constantly evolving. The noise only came from around me. Within me, there was silence and peace to listen, feel, and devise a plan of action that was based on my wholeness and with all my abilities in play. Just like when I was a little girl in my bubble, where I could just be and enjoy myself for days. The outside world could sail its way and I would not notice it, as I was so busy with my thoughts and my little world. But back then I also had a bold and positive reaction and interaction with the outside world. All of a sudden, I could navigate with my combined intelligence, the whole of me. I could navigate from self-responsibility and not over-responsibility for the opinions and attitudes of others. I didn't believe them anyway. I also didn't take responsibility to avoid conflicts, or because I didn't think I could do it because of overwhelming emotional thoughts. I used the whole of me, and there life became magical despite all the challenges life also offers, but which today are handled with ease. This gave me so much that I made it my life's mission and vision to find a more concrete way to handle our emotional intellect and combine this with a concrete operational intellect. To understand our own wholenesses better in order to navigate, integrate, and transform change processes more in flow and with ease. Thus, everything is today gathered under the concept Ancient Academy. With our signature, you find your originality, a place where divergent people meet in motion. A place for the frontrunners who are cooked in their own stew and need to find wholenesses inside themselves and the life around them. A place where we shall have fun as we learn about and couple the dualities to create quality and a balanced thought form dedicated to us. A place where we also work with an academic and theoretical philosophizing about units and wholenesses as consciousnesses in our forms of intelligences. A place where we integrate ancient knowledge with today's knowledge, and where religions, science and spirituality become transformed into universality and universal understanding and perception abilities, and thus universal tools. A place where, together, we form what we are lacking, and which creates the bridge between the divergent worlds and concepts, knowledge or quantum knowledge, emotional intellect or operational intellect. A place where we learn to understand our own consciousness, to be able to understand that of others. A place where we learn to develop and transform with ease, and to activate all of our abilities by using our dynamic intuition and organic instincts combined with each other. A place where you can find the wholeness inside you with your own navigation system based on the abilities of your consciousness.